Hello, everyone. I am Antonio Oyer from Zaragoza in Spain, and this is my fourth sermon in a row. It is the second one in which I am a member of this thematic working group team. I apologize for not being here in real time. I will be joining you tomorrow. And now I have to present the workshop, which will take place on Friday, I think. This workshop is based on the paper that I am presenting at this conference, and also it is based on some previous work. So I think that it is interesting to provide you a brief overview of this work, so you have a more or less clear idea of what to expect in the workshop. Of course, I have not much time, so I think that I have to keep it short. I will just cover a few points in this presentation. And of course, this is a place where we do not need to argue the possible uses of history of mathematics, and in particular of original sources in mathematics education. Of course, it can contribute to humanize mathematics and to provide this social and cultural view of the subject. And also from a more subject-specific point of view, we can use history as an inspiration, so to speak, in order to design tasks, the teaching sequences, and to improve the teaching and learning processes in which we use them. And of course, all of this is true regardless the level or the age of the students. Many times we want to use history and original sources in a context of teacher training. So the students are students, of course, but they are studying to become mathematics teachers. So they will need not only to acquire mathematical knowledge, but also pedagogical knowledge. And from this point of view, there are, I would say, a rather big amount of literature dealing with the relationship between history of mathematics, historical sources, and development and use of this MKT framework, which of course consists of subject matter knowledge, pedagogical content knowledge, etc. You can find many works studying this relationship. But this is very knowledge-oriented, so to speak. And it seems interesting to shift the focus from knowledge to classroom practice, to effective classroom practice. And Kathy Clark, at her plenary talk in the last sermon at Utrecht, already covered this point. This is a quotation from her talk, in which she presents this interesting research question related to the study of the history of mathematics. How can we identify the impact of studying history of mathematics in classroom practice of teachers, both in explicit and in implicit ways? However, the importance this question might have, it seems to me that it has not received much attention yet. So this work tries to go in that direction. We are giving our first steps in this direction. It is in fact a follow-up work of this paper, this rather recent paper, in which we carried out a series of activities revolving around a fragment of Clairaut's Éléments de géométrie. In this paper, you may find in the web and read it, we adopted the approach that I have just talked about using MKT and analyzing how these prospective secondary teachers used their knowledge in order to analyze the fragment we were working with. But we were also interested in determining the possible impact of all these activities we carried out with them on their subsequent instructional design decisions. This was our objectives. And to do so, of course, we need some theory, some theoretical framework. There are many choices out there. We focused on instructional design, of course, since we are going to deal with these ideas, and we opted for this ADTRE model by Zhang and collaborators, which aims to describing in some sense the different steps of this instructional design process, so that we can see if history has an impact in one or other steps. And this is, of course, is general pedagogical framework, nothing specifically related to mathematics here, in order to analyze the students' productions. We recur to this notion of epistemic configuration that we borrow from the ontosemiotic approach by Font, Godino, and some other collaborators in Granada, which this figure more or less attempts to describe. Maybe during the workshop we will be able to analyze this a little bit deeper. And with these tools in our hands, we worked with 24 prospective secondary education mathematics teachers, and a series of tasks that we carried out with them consisted on 3 steps. First, they had to work individually at home. They had to read the fragment, answer some open-ended questions, etc. This first step was covered in the 2020 paper that I just mentioned. Then in a classroom session in pairs, they carried out more mathematically oriented work, which was related to the definition of tangent to a circle, which is a content discovered in the fragment they had worked with. This point, I hope that we will address during the workshop. And finally, a third step, which is the one we focus on this presentation, which was again individual work, and they were asked to design a 50-minute session for grade 8 students using GeoGebra, had to be related to the mathematical contents covered in Clairaut's text, and we asked them to be rather to provide rather detailed description of their design. They had to provide objectives, the definitions of the mathematical concepts, methodological indications, tasks with timing, GeoGebra file, etc. And on top of that, they were also asked explicitly about the influence on their design resulting from their work with Clairaut's text. We analyzed from our researchers' point of view the text by Clairaut. We also, of course, performed a global analysis of the participants' design, and we paid special attention to the participants' answer to this question about the possible influence or not of Clairaut's text. A very, very brief overview of the results. We find the students that state that have not been influenced by their work with the historical source for different reasons. These reasons can be related to previous works in the literature with in-service teachers. They seem to have difficulties reading the text, and then they put it aside and don't use it never again in their design. Some other students state that history of mathematics is one thing and mathematics teaching is other, so they decide not to use it. But nevertheless, there are a good number of students that declared explicit influence in different points of this instructional design process, mostly related to the selection of contents, which was expected, of course, and also in the selection of strategies, resources, media, etc. Here there is a direct quotation by one of the participants, which she stated that working with the original source made her reflect, which is a good thing to do when one is designing something. The implicit influence is much harder to find and to assess. For example, Clairaut's procedure is rather dynamical, as we will see during the workshop, and we could identify it in the design of only 9 of the participants. And also we were able to trace Clairaut's arguments in the design of the participants. For example, the idea of the second line becoming the tangent, and also some continuity ideas that were not going to be found probably if the students had not worked with Clairaut's text, which is in a geometry context, it is not usual in grade 8 to find discussion about continuity, limits, and functional ideas. As I have just mentioned, it's difficult to read original sources. Some of the participants pointed it out. And then the influence of this work on ulterior teaching practice can be very related to the ability of the teacher to grasp the material. We wonder if this can be trained, how, etc. I have already mentioned also that it is difficult to identify and assess the implicit influence of the text on the participants' design. We ask them explicitly, but when we analyze their design, it is sometimes difficult. We have tried to compare the Clairaut's epistemic configuration with those of the participants, trying to find similarities and differences, but we probably need some other instruments such as interviews and so on. So participants, in some sense, proudly express that their work with the source had absolutely no impact on the design. Do we want to address this? How could we address this if we decided that this is an issue? And this leads to a final remark, which is the importance of the teacher educator, which orchestrates in some sense these activities with our students. I hope that some of these remarks, questions will be addressed during the workshop, which I intend to organize around 4 points. The first one will be getting you familiar with the source. So I will ask you to read the original text by Clairaut in English. I will provide the French original for those of you who can read French, but there will also be an English translation. So maybe we can reflect on the difficulties, the contents, and so on. Then I want you to play the role both of the participants and of the researchers. So I will ask you some of the questions that the participants were asked and see how would you have answered them. And then also I will ask you to analyze Clairaut's text using this tool of epistemic configuration. I would have liked to analyze with you some of the productions of the students, but they are in Spanish, and I think it's difficult to translate them, enough of them at least, so we will restrict ourselves to analyzing the source. And finally, let's see what ideas and concerns and issues I am interested on discussing possible theoretical and methodological framework for this kind of research. So I hope that we will have, I will have fruitful feedback from you during this workshop. So see you on Friday, and I hope that you find it interesting enough. Thank you very much.